Peter dreams of becoming a killer, describes all the students at the school. He is a student who is good at studying. Peter is too confident and even looks cool to the women. There was a man who approached Peter who was big. He was a gangster at the school. Peter managed to lure them out. Peter was accused of seducing his girlfriend. Peter Pan was confused about who he meant. The big man was crying angrily. Who knows what he was feeling? The girlfriend he meant was Yejin. Jang Iseol is the best love slave of Honor High School. He just dated Yejin on 22 days. He became a man whose girlfriend was stolen by Peter. The big man immediately landed a punch. Jang Iseol is a man who was able to conquer Mopo district with one blow. But for the first time, one of his blows was avoided by young Peter easily managed to dodge it, and instead hit back with one punch too. Just being hit by the wind, the big man was very scared. But Peter's hand stopped just above the man's head. Just by using his finger, the man was smacked by Peter's hand, which was very fast. His friends were very afraid to see Peter, because their heads had fallen down and their heads had bumps. Suddenly a teacher came and broke up their fight. Then the master asked Peter what your father did. Peter answered that maybe my father was dead. The teacher also apologized to Peter. Then the teacher and Peter left while the teacher was angry. The fat man still wanted to hit Peter, but he was held back by his friends because it seemed he was having a hard time facing Peter. The figure of a mysterious man with a dark face is visible here. The mysterious man was curious about Peter and wanted to find out everything about him. A plan so scary he tried to kill him. A plan that was truly unexpected. Meanwhile, Peter was still with the teacher and was taken out of the area. Peter followed the teacher's orders and followed where he was going. Yejin realizes that Peter is at that school. Is he going to destroy this school? Such a good school might be destroyed by Peter. In a school garden, Yejin and Sungu meet. They both want to have lunch. But here Yejin was surprised. Why are you here? Peter said everyone was after me, so I went here. Peter also asked Yejin, why are you here? Yejin said that she had no appetite. But Peter was surprised because he brought so much food. Yejin was a little offended and blushed. Yejin is actually still confused about why he is at this school. Yejin remembered Peter's promise before, that he would let him live if he thought old Peter was dead. And that is the guarantee of his life, Yejin. Yejin feels like she has kept her promise. But she continues to be followed by young Peter. The woman said, maybe you mean to kill me now. But Peter didn't mean it like that. Because of you, I'm the only one watching over that organization. Do you know how hard my life is right now? Apparently the woman was difficult to talk to. Peter felt he had succeeded in saving the woman. And you had to obey him? But Yejin insisted on bringing him to safety alone at that time. You don't even know what this place is like, this very scary place. You don't even know my real identity. What do you think an outsider can do in a place like this? Sungu wants to be helped by Yejin. Who doesn't know anything in a place like this? Sungu or young Peter wants the woman's cooperation in the future. The woman was surprised that Peter knew her real name at school. It is known that the woman's real name is Liuna. After the conversation was over, Peter suddenly disappeared as the woman walked away from Peter. One day the school held competitions, which were quite entertaining for the students. Don't miss out. Peter immediately follows all the matches. Young Peter, the new student, managed to win the match. The defending champion lost to a Peter, and he cried on the side of the road. In other competitions, Peter managed to win. There is something unique in this match, namely peeling apples. Peter is teased about not being able to use a knife by the other students. With extraordinary calm, Peter will finish this match. And the results are beyond reason. Peter succeeded in making the apple look like a rabbit. Everyone was in awe of him. The final game is here. In all the matches that Peter managed to win, there is a mysterious figure who is always watching him. In another place there is a teacher who wants to be beaten by his students. It turned out that the students didn't want to clean up, and instead wanted to pick a fight with the teacher. The students were not afraid of their teacher at all. These students have usurped the authority of a teacher. But the students insisted on speaking rudely to the teacher. The teacher was immediately hit and fell. The mouth said, "How do you know what is scarier than punishment? Your teaching license will definitely be revoked when I see you. If you don't want to be fired, don't get involved in my business," said the students. It turns out there was a student who recorded it. Not long after, Peter came with a trash can. Peter saw the teacher, who had fallen after being beaten by the student, and immediately asked about that. The students admitted it and instead told Peter to leave there. But Peter didn't want to go. The students felt they could handle Peter there. Peter was even spat at by one of the students. Peter could still hold back his emotions. They instead landed a blow on Peter. They thought that the blow would hit Peter. But Peter managed to avoid it easily, without spilling his cup of coffee. They continued to throw several punches, but Peter casually avoided them. With very sharp eyes, Peter managed to knock the student down. One of the students was successfully knocked down. Suddenly, there was a student from behind holding a brick. It turned out that the student wanted to hit Peter from behind, but Peter realized and immediately broke the brick with his hand. Suddenly, they were surprised by Peter's abilities. They finally apologized to the teacher and promised not to do it again. They apologized to Peter and immediately left. Peter asked how the teacher was doing. The teacher even blamed Peter for fighting in front of the teacher. Peter found the student's cell phone, which he had left behind. Suddenly, when he wanted to take the cell phone, the teacher instead attacked Peter suddenly from behind. Peter realized that. Peter managed to avoid it. The teacher just smiled seeing Peter dodging his attack. Peter's eyes are really sharp in seeing things. The teacher said that Peter was not an ordinary student. The coffee you were holding didn't spill at all when you were fighting. The teacher is confused. Where did you learn all that? The teacher asked Peter, what is your aim in learning all that? Peter said what he really kept in his heart. Peter wants revenge on the Glory Club, which has robbed him of his life. Peter had lost his home, his family, the people he had gathered together. Peter said that Peter's current state was like a dead person. Peter, or Sun Gu's nickname, was finally offered to enter the volunteer club. It turns out that a mysterious figure was always watching Peter yesterday during the competition. The teacher had been waiting for Peter for a long time. The teacher turns out to be a Killer Club Glory trainer. While walking towards the training room, the teacher said that it is rare for transfer students to be as talented as you, Sun Gu. They opened the entrance to the training ground. And what a surprise Peter was. So this is the Glory Killer training place, namely the volunteer by the location. Was this really the place to be a killer? As we know, the other students also looked at Peter's face. The coach introduced to the other students that Sun Gu was a member of the volunteer club. Li Yuna was surprised. Why was he here? Yuna stared at Peter's face for a long time. Peter didn't want to be stared at like that. Peter tried to give Yuna a code so that other people wouldn't find out about their collaboration. Peter tried to blink his eyes, but Yuna misinterpreted the meaning of the wink. Peter introduced himself to his new colleagues. The atmosphere of the place is like a normal place, but it turns out it is for killer training. It seems that Peter will have a little trouble with the people who have been in the volunteer club for a long time. Like it or not, Peter had to serve them a welcome that takes the form of a fight. Yuna tries to stop those who want to fight. He thought they would be killed by young Peter. Yuna was even told to leave that place. Yuna tries to save them from danger, but they didn't budge. They thought Peter couldn't fight and instead mocked him. Peter was asked, can you fight? Peter answered, yes, just a little I can fight. Maybe around 1,500 times. They started attacking Peter. They thought that this fight would end tragically. They attack using sharp knives. unexpected thing that resisted their attack. They thought that they could win against Peter. They really want to become the greatest assassin in the world. He liked the parcel Peter liked the big photo behind them. They say that there is no place for nepotism babies like you. The fight continued, but no one was injured. Young Peter was starting to get fed up with all this. According to Peter, the dialogue between the two of them was very annoying. Peter had them both attack at the same time. They both thought Peter was crazy. They think that their life has been very hard for 18 years. But they didn't know that Peter had lived for 65 years. The fight stopped when Peter left the place. They thought they could defeat Peter and left in fear. From that place, his friends also thought that the two people couldn't fight and couldn't move. Peter, or his fake name at school, Sungu, left the training ground. Yuna apparently followed Peter away. Yuna finally approached Peter. Yuna said that Peter underestimated the volunteer club too much. Peter was confused by Yuna's conversation. It turns out that Yuna always secretly watched over Peter when he was new. Based on Yuna's observations, Peter didn't use his full strength at all. Smart doesn't pour any strength into his hands, through his fists at all. But Peter denied it. He did his best. Yuna is still adamant because she has proof. The proof is that the two of them who are fighting you are very sweaty. Different from you. You don't even sweat at all. Yuna was a little annoyed because Peter didn't want to tell her the truth. According to Yuna, Peter's presence at school was very suspicious. What exactly does Peter want to learn from that school so he can hide his strength? They looked at each other. Then Peter said, "Do you really want to know what my real goal is?" Yuna wanted to know the truth. But it's a shame that Peter only jokingly said that. Peter didn't say his destination at all, and instead went to have lunch. Yuna just stared at Peter leaving. The scene moves to another place, namely a bus terminal. There was a driver who planned to return after sunrise. It turns out he owns the bus and wants to rent out the bus. Then there was someone who apparently wanted to rent the bus for 1 million won. It was a fantastic meeting and the man felt very lucky. After seeing the person who wanted to rent, the man was shocked. He was surprised because there was only one person who wanted to ride his bus. The prospective passenger was carrying a suitcase. He was the only passenger on the bus, but he had a lot of things to carry. Then the driver put the suitcase in the trunk. The driver was surprised because what he was carrying was all suitcases. After loading one of the suitcases, the driver was curious about the contents of the suitcase. There were dozens of coins. The reason was that the bus was even asked to bet. He was asked to guess what was in the suitcase. The driver didn't want to accept the bet, but he knew what was inside the suitcase. According to the driver, the contents of the cover were moving. The scene changes to the teacher, a volunteer club leader. The teacher gathered his students. The teacher said that there is a mission that you must complete. The client is the president of Daeho Group, Choi Yin-chun. You must have heard that what the teacher said. He is one of the biggest sponsors of the Glory Club. Then the base team gets a volunteer certificate, which President Choi recommended. In other words, you will officially become a murderer. The teacher talked about the mission that the students would carry out. The mission is to rescue kidnapped people. Recently, there have been many kidnappings of teenagers. The problem is that one of the kidnapped children is President Choi's son. The students asked why not just call the police. So, the teacher answered that you are right. We can call the police. But that's not the problem. The problem is that the pretentious president wants revenge. All you did was save his child. Sir. The teacher also told his students to raise their hands if they wanted to save the child. The students were silent for a long time, wanting to raise their hands. The teacher said that if you don't want to raise your hand, you have to stay here for 2 years to become a real killer. The students are all afraid of that. Adults should do something like that. But the student who had fought Peter yesterday took courage. They both raised their hands. They thought no one dared accept him. Peter and Una raised their hands too. They both raised their hands. But they both wanted to fight. Una accused Peter of raising his hand too. But Peter raised his hand first, he said. The student who raised his hand immediately wanted to get ready to leave. But the teacher didn't let them go straight away. The teacher has another strategy for that. In his heart, Peter said that he had a great opportunity at that school. Their plan started with the game rights. That's the teacher's strategy for saving kidnapped children. When they arrived at the game, they were immediately greeted with a somber dance. They were surprised because they were wearing bikinis. In a playground like this, whether they like it. Una was surprised by their colleague, who kept looking at the somber dancer. Una is still thinking about where the kidnapping happened. Meanwhile, Peter was seduced by a girl at that location. Una is still curious about what the teacher said. According to the teacher, that is where the kidnapping occurred. The teacher showed a picture of the location where the incident occurred. They were told to paralyze the kidnapper at that place. The kidnapped child was last seen at the Blue Word. Now, who knows where he is and whether he is still alive or not? That's what Una is thinking. But in a place this big, can you find him? And there are no instructions. In Una's mind, she thought of Peter, who looked calm, as if he already knew everything. Then Peter directed his role to come with him. Where do they go? They went to the playground. They seemed to want to play something. But a servant actually bothered them. They even wanted to fight with the servant. They were told to download an application to find out which places were still empty of visitors. Someone asked Una if you wanted to have fun, go into this place. They thought that Una had no intention of carrying out this mission. And as we know, those who mock Una are playing themselves. They look like little children. Other visitors did not expect that parents like them played like children. Peter and Una seemed to be taking the time to play too. They headed to the shooting range, and the results were visible. They all brought gifts. The uncle was shocked even though he had put weight on the doll, so it couldn't fall. Meanwhile, they had gathered and wanted to continue playing. They seemed very enthusiastic. As we can see, they seemed to be going to a playground like that for the first time, because they must have also experienced difficult things in the past. They continued to have fun. Who knows when they'll be able to smile broadly like that again? But they didn't come to have fun. After taking a break from the play area, Una stopped and sat on a bench. Una looked at the cell phone she was holding. Suddenly, an iPod signal belonging to the kidnapped chairman's son appeared on Una's cell phone. Una was curious about the signal, but after checking it turned out the location was in the women's toilet. Una headed to the toilet and went inside. Slowly he started to open the toilet door, and after arriving at the toilet room, inside there was a woman and the signal came from that woman. Una also wondered whether this was really the location of the signal. Una tried to ask the woman. Una had to try to smile at the woman, so she wouldn't be afraid to see her. But still the woman was afraid and screamed very loudly. It turned out that there was also a man inside, who was the woman's lover. He said to his male friend the woman wanted to hit from behind. Una was shocked by the woman's words to her man, even though Una was just asking. But the man accused Una of wanting to steal her lover's things. Una said that it was just a misunderstanding. But the man slapped Una and she fell. His female friend said that he didn't need to beat him, but just needed to apologize. But the man still wanted to beat him. Una's position was in a pinch. Una's friends are looking for her whereabouts. They thought Una had eaten somewhere. They also asked Peter, but Peter didn't see it either. Actually, Peter already knew that nothing would happen to Una. Back to Yuna's fight. Yuna prepared to counterattack in a tight position. That's right, when the man was about to hit Yuna, Yuna suddenly jumped up and wanted to attack back. The man was made helpless by Yuna. Finally, the man lost to Young. They were forced to say where they got their iPods. Yuna managed to get information about their iPods. Yuna immediately went to her friends. Yuna has been waiting for her friends. Peter suspects somewhere. His friend asked, "What do you mean, Peter?" What Peter meant was a haunted house. Peter explains below why he suspects a haunted house. Because in a very busy place, the best way to kidnap someone is in an inconspicuous place. Peter explained that even though there was a kidnapping, nothing seemed to happen. The reservation page also looks full all day. While the place looks quiet, there are no people. The four of them headed to the haunted house. Then they headed to the haunted house. They tried to open the door. They had to focus on the room. The color red in the house was really scary. Ark and Peter, two big men, didn't dare to be in front even though he said he wanted to be in front. Finally, Peter took the lead. Suddenly, Peter told them to stop. Peter started to become suspicious about the place. Because there was absolutely no one in that place. Apart from the four of them, Peter warned his friends, so that they were ready to wait for something to come. Their mission will start from here. Suddenly someone threw poison gas. The poisonous gas began to spread throughout the room. They started to get confused about how to avoid it. We must not give up, because our mission is already halfway to completion, because of their mission in rescuing hostages and eliminating their kidnappers. That's why from the start what we planned was to be their hostage. They finally all fainted. Then, still in a semi-conscious state, they heard the sound of someone's footsteps. In a state of helplessness, they can only surrender. Elsewhere, the teacher was in a hurry and broke down the door to his room. The teacher came in and immediately asked his assistant, "Where are the children?" The assistant answered that he was probably carrying out his mission. The teacher realized that they were actually carrying out a dangerous mission. It was not an ordinary mission. The teacher mentioned the name of someone named Sangdo. He was someone who was proposed as an apostle in the past, but was thrown out because Glory couldn't face it. The assistant said that nothing would happen to them, because they had learned a lot from here. But the teacher had another bad feeling. In a haunted house, Peter and Yuna are in danger. Peter and Yuna are being held captive in a room. Then a man came. The man's name is Sangdu. It turned out that the anesthetic used for anesthesia was a type of chloroform. But usually those affected by bias have their mouths open. Go back to the teacher's place. The teacher said that they had to stop immediately, because the kidnapper, Mr. Sangdo, is a very hateful person. We must immediately save them from danger, Mr. Sangdo. The teacher is also worried about the condition of his students when dealing with Mr. Sangdo. The worst possibility was that but when you want to do something to the children. Yuna's cell phone rang in her pocket. Balance app, then pick up the phone, then pick up the phone. It turned out that it was the teacher who called them. The teacher had memorized the voice who answered the phone. In a very angry state, the teacher wanted to bet his life with Mr. Sangdo. Then Park Sangdo answered the telephone conversation. "Why are you talking so scary?" said Mr. Sangdo. "I will make their legs disabled like you said, Mr. Sangdo." The teacher, with overflowing charity, wants to visit Mr. Sangdo. If the teacher reaches this place, I wonder how many of their legs will still be intact, said Mr. Sangdo. In their bet, if the teacher wins, then Choi Yun-chong's son will be freed. But if there is time, then all of his students will be finished. The teacher was shaking on the rocks because he was so scared. Suddenly, after they ended their conversation, someone called from outside. They said the names Yuna and Sungu. Mr. Sangdo was curious about that voice. After Mr. Sangdo left, Yuna tried to untie her shoelaces and take off her shoes. Then his legs stretched out towards Kim Sun-gu's face. Yuna was even surprised that Sun-gu had woken up first. According to Sun-gu, Yuna's stinky feet and then sticking them in his face was very impolite. Then Yuna untied the rope tied to her hand. Yuna was shocked because Sun-gu was the first to escape from his bindings. Sun-gu had already cut the rope that tied her hands when Yuna was in danger earlier. Yuna said that this was not a simple mission. The person who had previously been in the Glory Club. Then Sun-gu or Peter said, "Hey Yuna, do you like betting?" Yuna just stared at his words. Their two friends looked like they didn't care. After Sangdo arrived at their place, the two brothers immediately wanted to end it. Sangdo looks like an ordinary office employee. They asked where the kidnapped child was, but again that uncle invited them to bet with them. They both agreed. In a hurry, the teacher went to where the students were because he was worried that something would happen to them. Sangdo took something out of his pocket. Sangdo continues the bet. If they lose, then their feet are guaranteed. Their bet was very dangerous for the brothers and sisters, but they were very confident. They were even very eager to defeat that uncle and make him unable to walk tomorrow. But the uncle actually dropped the weapons, so they could use them too. The bet will be fairer if you use the same weapon. Without hesitation, the two of them immediately took it and attacked the uncle. They clashed with each other. Sangdo is still calm. They think uncle is slower than them. Uncle hasn't launched an attack at all, he's still defending. They are full of confidence that they can win over uncle. Suddenly, in an instant, uncle immediately turned things around. Uncle swung his weapon very quickly. They were shocked by that. It was clear that the type of knife blade was the same. They felt something was wrong. Sure enough, it turned out that my uncle gave me a knife that didn't have a blade. The uncle even laughed at them. Then Sun-gu and Yuna come. But the brothers told Sun-gu and Yuna not to interfere, because this is a betting battle. If we lose, chances are you won't be able to win. They were told to just watch from a distance. Sun-gu and Yuna obeyed the two of them and just watched from afar. They both looked excited again after they told him about their goals. That is, to be like a Peter. They don't know that Sun-gu is the one. They both immediately launched an attack, because according to them, uncle was a ladder that had to be traversed to become like a pier. They managed to corner uncle. Their cooperation is very good. One of them jumped up to launch his attack, while saying that uncle will regret giving him the knife, while swinging his gun and aiming it at uncle's head. Suddenly, without realizing it, the uncle grabbed his hand. Then one of his friends helped by holding out his knife. Suddenly, the uncle swung his knife and destroyed the knives of the two brothers. It's very strange for lay people. It's clearly the same type of knife, but it can destroy the opponent's knife. Based on information, the weapon used by uncle was called a kukri. Kukri is a traditional machete-shaped weapon from Nepal. The thickness and weight of the weapon were 3 times heavier than ordinary sharp weapons. It takes special skills to master this weapon. Faster than a knife and heavier than an axe. The weapon is a weapon suitable for killing someone. But the students didn't believe uncle's nonsense. They continued to launch a 2-pronged attack. According to the students, it turned out that uncle was not an ordinary office employee, because judging from the way he fights, it is really very different from ordinary people. The two brothers and sisters told Yuna and Sun-gu to leave that place. Seeing the two of them fall, Yuna screamed very loudly. The Dokgo brothers had to lose to their uncle named Sangdo. They weren't killed by Mr. Sangdo, just dying. Even so, Mr. Balancing doesn't want to lose his betting agreement. Even so, Mr. Sangdo doesn't want to lose his betting agreement, namely cutting off both their legs. Yuna was very worried if that really happened. Just before Mr. Sangdo wanted to cut off their legs, Sun Gu offers the bet back to 2 times. 2 sleeves plus neck. Mr. Sangdo was immediately interested in the offer. Mr. Sangdo threw the same weapon at Peter. Mr. Sangdo said again that the fight would be fair if the weapons used were the same. Yuna is angry with Mr. Sangdo's style of giving the same weapon when facing the brothers. But Peter said he didn't need the knife. It didn't make sense. Peter even took a tray with a picture of a flower on it. Mr. Sangdo actually laughed out loud at Peter's behavior. Mo Sangdo said it was very funny. Pak Sangdo is older but won't give in to the younger ones. With Sangdo's speed, he immediately launched himself at Peter. Peter uses the tray as a shield. Pak Sangdo continued to launch attacks with the kukri weapon. Meanwhile, the teacher still hasn't arrived at the location. The teacher imagines what happened when he was young. At that time, Mr. Sangdo was fired from the Glory Club because he caused a big mess. The Glory Club really wants to finish off Mr. Sangdo because he has made a very big mistake. But Mr. Sangdo is difficult to stop because his strength is beyond human. And exactly that day I lost my leg. Hopefully what happened that day will not happen again with the new students. Back to Peter and Sangdo's fight. Sangdo managed to split the tray and hit Peter's head. The tray finally split into 2. With only shield finally became 2. Yuna really wants to help, but it is very dangerous for Yuna. Thanks to Sangdo, Peter finally had 2 weapons in his hands, namely a tray that was split into 2. Sangdo was surprised by the student's ability. He wasn't even an ordinary student, even though the uncle thought that his slash was very clear about Peter's head. But in an instant he managed to jump back. Her body was fine, even just the tray was split. Is it true that he is just a student? Sangdo was surprised by that. He asked where he learned tricks like that. Sangdo took off his shirt, then threw the shirt in the direction Peter was at full speed. The uncle attacked Peter after the shirt was thrown. The uncle wanted to make sure that the trick was right or wrong. The uncle was sure he had slashed him because it was clearly visible. But who would have thought what uncle slashed was a pillow? Peter suddenly appeared from behind. Peter could have cut that uncle's throat, but the uncle's hand protected his neck. In an instant, Peter was behind the uncle. Without a doubt, he could have cut his neck. If he hadn't been pushed away with uncle's hand, his neck might have been severed. The uncle began to understand that the tray was not actually used as a shield, but also can scratch clothes. But the trays can hurt exposed skin, such as the neck and hands. Besides that, the student showed unmatched speed. The uncle doubted whether he was really human. The weight of the kukri can destroy objects around it. Every time it is swung, if it gets hit, anyone will definitely die. But uncle's movements were slower than Kim Sun-gu. Maybe because he was burdened with the kukri weapon. His movements were slow. If the flow of the fight is like that, it's possible that Sun-gu can win. But there was something strange about uncle's weapon. In this weapon there is another weapon, namely a smaller knife. Sun-gu's face was finally cut by the knife. Because the weight is lighter, the uncle's movements are faster than before. The uncle now controlled the course of the fight. Now Sun-gu can only survive. Uncle was very different from before. His movements were much faster than before. But Yuna thought it was very strange. It was clear that the weapon was for stabbing. But this uncle just winged it. With relentless attacks, the uncle managed to corner Sun-gu, to the point where the uncle wanted to stab Sun-gu in the neck. Suddenly, the uncle's weapon fell from his grasp. This was a very unexpected thing for Mr. Sangdo. The uncle was now starting to wake up. The disciple wasn't actually aiming for his neck, but from the start, he was deliberately aiming for that uncle's hand. Flexor muscles, extensor muscles, adductor muscles, median nerve, radial nerve, ulnar nerve, ligament muscles needed to make a fist. Sun-gu has cut everything. From the start, Sun-gu didn't intend to kill the uncle. That uncle couldn't accept all the sullen treatment. The man in front of the uncle was not just an ordinary student. Actually, how many people has he killed so far? That is a big question for that uncle. Previously, the uncle said that the silver tray couldn't beat uncle's sturdy weapon. From now on it will be proven that the tray can crush anything, namely crushing rocks with a fist made from a tray sheath.